I'm going to grab the Microscope, and it's one of them cheap ones that you can get on Amazon for like 20 quid. So it's the sort of thing that, you know, anyone can get.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
If you've got 20 quid. Which I very much appreciate that not everyone does.
True.
But, you know what? If they don't, they can watch this video.
Again, we are giving science to all.
Yes!
Yeah.
This is cute.
Well, let's talk about what a microscope actually is.
Yeah! What is a microscope? The purpose of a microscope is to essentially refract, bend light. Yeah?
Yeah.
So we've got, and the reason why I've done an absolute, what we call in the chess world, a blunder.
Yeah.
I've made a massive mistake. So we haven't got a little plug for this thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why we need a plug is there's a light at the bottom. And what it does is it shines light through this little hole right here.
Yeah.
And we pass that light through an object, through a specimen. And it gets gathered by this little lens right here. There's a little lens in these three little doohickeys, like that.
Word.
Doohickey.
Yeah.
Doohickey. It's called the objective lens. And that lens passes through these sort of range of tubes, and we've got an extra lens at the end, and it sort of magnifies stuff through. If you can maybe see Seb on the other side right there. And he should be flipped upside down actually. But yeah, all we're doing with a microscope is we're passing light through a specimen, and it's sort of bending a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it's bending and bending and bending it until it's really big.
Yeah. Okay, so I see like loads of like doohickeys. I'm going to use that one.
I like the word doohickey.
Here, and there's some here and one there. What do those do?
Oh. So all we're doing with this little knob is we're twisting the knob, and it gets closer to, I say the stage, this plate right here where we put the objects, put the specimens. It gets either closer or further away from the objective lens. Okay, and that's to get it in focus. So we've got three dials. So this dial shifts it up and down. We've got this just moves it up and down. This moves it left to right.
Is that so you can move the slide?
So you can move whatever specimen the
Don't
slide.
have those at school.
No, and that's why I like this one. Can I go on a tangent?
Always.
I once went to this place in Amsterdam called Microscopic,
Yeah.
and it was a science museum,
Yeah.
and it was the best science museum I've ever been to. It was phenomenal, and it was all about the science of microbes and microscopic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things for me that really blew my mind is, and I'd say, as an astrophysicist,
Yeah.
as someone who's interested in space and stuff,
Which is so big.
it's so big.
So big.
And a lot of the time when we want to look for like other worlds, we go outwards.
Yep.
But what this science museum did was, it was like, right, instead of going outwards, let's go inwards.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And it's such an alien world down
Yeah.
there. It's the science of the really small, the really small, the really small, the really small.
Adding to your tangent, I was teaching or talking about DNA in one of my lessons this week. The amount of things that happen on a microscopic level that allow us to be the humans that we are, you know, even just like, for example, you've got a small cut or a grain, and you know, you go into your cells, you go into the nucleus of the cell, you go into your chromosomes, and you've got a specific gene that you need in order to make the amino acids like into a chain, so you can make like all of that microscopic. Like it's not even microscopic; it's just smaller than micro.
You use that word, smaller than micro. What do you mean by that?
Well, so when we look at measurements, so we tend to measure distance from the meter. At least in science, it's kind of a good place to that everyone can sort of access. And then a micrometer, it's like a smaller measurement than a meter. So millimeter is 1,000th of a meter.
And we'd measure things like our fingernails.
Yeah.
Like, you know, your fingernails grow 3 millimeters every 3 months or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm making that number up.
Don't fact check us there. And then you go one smaller into a micrometer, which is 1,000th of a meter, which would be a millionth.
So it's 1,000th of 1,000th of a meter.
Yes.
So that's literally, when we say a microscope, we're looking at things that are on that micro measurement.
Yes.
Microverse! Teenyverse.
We've been talking about microscopes and how
Yes,
they work. We've
yes,
been looking
yes,
at the micro,
Yeah.
what it means. What should we look at?
I think we need to start where a place where everyone can have access to.
Okay.
Bodies of water. We all have access to drinking water. Some of us might be near a river or a pond or by the ocean. And there are so many microscopic organisms in these bodies of water that I think it'd be a great place for.
So I think about, I run through the park sometimes,
Yeah.
and there's massive ponds
Yeah,
near the park.
yeah.
How about something like that?
It sounds perfect.
Bosh.
Let's take a look at some pond water. Let's go.
Water mites are tiny arachnids found in freshwater habitats like ponds and streams. Now they look very similar to spiders because they are closely related. However, these little arachnids range in size from about 0.5 millimeter to 3 millimeters, making them almost but not quite invisible to the naked eye. Now they typically have a lifespan of between a few weeks to a few months, depending on where they live and what sort of species they are. Now, as the footage comes into focus here, you will see a stem of a little bit of moss. Now the arrow here is showing the xylem cells of the stem, and these are little tiny cells whose job it is to transport water. A very important job for any plant to complete a process called photosynthesis, responsible for the oxygen in the air that we breathe. Now as we zoom in closer here, in the red circle you'll be able to see root hair cells who've got a vital job of absorbing that water that's needed for photosynthesis. And you can see as it comes into focus here, just along where that red circle was, the root hair cells. Now, interestingly enough, when we saw the root hair cells, we managed to find a rotifer. Now, a rotifer is a microscopic aquatic animal measuring between 0.1 to 0.5 millimeter in length. That's around about 100 micrometers to 500 micrometers. Now, despite their size, they are incredibly complex. Now, here as we zoom in, you can see this rotifer eating. It's got a little rotating jaw that it uses to bring in food to eat. How fascinating. Now, on our hunt in the Microverse, we managed to find a different species of rotifer. Now again, this rotifer is closely related to the previous rotifer that we saw, and it's got a lot of similarities. However, here you can see that it's got a small little tail. Now as we zoom in, using a different objective lens, you can see the vast complexity that exists in this tiny rotifer. You can see its little organs and just about see its little rotating jaws. You can also see that it's also eating, hunting for food. Now, one of the things that's incredible about rotifers is that they can reproduce through something called parthenogenesis, which means that they don't necessarily need a male to reproduce. Another fascinating thing that these little rotifers are able to do is something called cryptobiosis, where when there's not a availability of water, they can dry themselves out and go into a state of stasis. Now, not everything that we find in the Microverse is easily identifiable. Here we can see some very long-celled organisms that are simply just moving up and down. And me and Seb are by no stretch of the imagination microbiologists, so if you know what they are, let us know in the comments. Here you can see fly larvae. So this is a recently hatched little maggot from an egg and you can see how it moves. Now, movement in the microverse is a lot different to how we would think of it. So as we move through water, we think of it as something that's quite easy. However, when you're incredibly tiny, water tension is something that you have to take into consideration. Water tension is something that you have to take into consideration. Water's actually sticky. So these little microbes have to take into consideration the stickiness of water when they move, and you can see that this little maggot is using the stickiness of water to move itself around, moving around like a little accordion. Now, as I was looking at this little fly larva, I did a sort of sweep around, because looking for microscopic organisms is quite tricky, it takes a while. But I managed to, just by stroke of luck, find one of the most amazing creatures that any microbiologist, that any person with a microscope would love to find. And that is a tardigrade. And you can see it here looking fantastic. You can see its 6 little legs. And what I did was I swapped the microscope settings to look at it using a more traditional method. So we're looking at the tardigrade as it would look to your naked eye, not with the light passing through it. So the light is bouncing off the tardigrade, and you can see just what it would look like. If you had an eye that was powerful enough to see a tardigrade, that's what it would look like. It was completely transparent. Now, switching it back to the more typical way of using a microscope, where the light passes through the little tardigrade, you can see the intricacies of its little digestive system. Now, what was incredible was the little fly larva started to approach the tardigrade. It came over, sort of had a little sniff, and boop, maybe a little kiss, I don't know, and off it went. I genuinely had no idea what was going to happen to that poor little tardigrade. It looked quite helpless, sort of flailing around there, but the fly larva didn't seem that interested. This little tiny creature, they range in size from about 0.1 to 1.2 millimeters. This one was roughly 500 micrometers, or half a millimeter in size. Now, despite their tiny size, they've got 6 to 8 stubby little legs, and they've even got little tiny eyes, a mouth. They've got an entire digestive system. They are incredibly complex creatures. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love about them, especially in this clip, you can see their little tiny claws. They've got little tiny claws, making them resemble a bear, which is why they're commonly known as water bears. Famously, these tardigrades are indestructible. They're known to be indestructible. They can survive incredible conditions, so they can survive freezing, boiling temperatures, exposure to radiation. To do this, they go into a state of cryptobiosis, which essentially means they completely dry out, shut off their metabolism, and they switch off. They go into a state of dormancy. However, they are not as indestructible as you might think. They've only got a lifespan for around about 2 years, which for a microorganism is quite extraordinary. Now, the microbes that we've managed to see has barely touched the surface of the sheer diversity of microbial life that is out there. Now, all of these microorganisms, whether they live for days, months, years, contribute to an incredible delicate balance for all of the ecosystems of the world. And it reminds us of just how precious life truly is. All of the tiny, almost insignificant life forms that exist out there are essential for the life that we know.
Oh man, that was pretty good.
That was really good. I really enjoyed that.
I think we should do that again.
Do you know what, Seb?
Yes, Seb.
I think we should do that again.
I thought you were going to say we should kiss. Sorry.
That caught me totally off guard. What's the one? We should kiss though.
Yeah, later.